on this. There we go. Just want to first off by saying, what we normally do at the top of the hour at our NRG huddles. We've got a couple things going on if you have not seen on the NRG Facebook Connect page. First thing, we have a CE class coming up on March 20th. Take a look at that. I know I have a few spots left, but again, we are limited to space on that one. So if you're interested, please go in there, register, and I will make sure that you have a spot saved for that free 2-hour CE class. Second reminder is we actually have a open house, brokers open set up with the Minnesota Home Guys on March 12th, where it's open to everybody at NRG to come take a look at the property. I'm going to be there walking through how I do open houses, so you guys can learn from that. And then to see the before and after of what the Minnesota Home Guys do, which is really exciting just to see the house that they buy and what they turn it into and their whole process around that. So, all right, without further ado, I am really, really excited to introduce our guest speaker today. I've known Jenny for a couple years now. She was at a brokerage that I worked with before, but she is a rock star and she's going places, and it's really, really cool to watch her on social media and just see what she's doing. But she is the go-to person for short-term rentals, and that is something that I wanted to bring to you guys on our Tuesday huddles, because not only will it help you if you want to get into that, it could help your clients and also get investors. So I'm going to introduce Jenny. I'm going to let her tell you guys a little bit about her, and then she's got a presentation for us, and then we will have questions at the end. So without further ado, Miss Jenny Rozier, you've got the floor.
Thank you so much for having me on. I will say I did not come prepared with a presentation, but I have an outline of things to talk about. I'd like this to be more conversational if possible, but I'll go ahead and share.
Yeah,
I'll
you
go ahead
you
and
let us know.
yeah, mostly because I did not have time to prepare a presentation because I've been very busy with real estate, which is great. But I can share a little bit about me. So my background is actually in higher education. I became a full-time real estate agent in July 2022. I joined Greater Midwest Realty, which is where I met Jill. And I was at that brokerage for a couple months. And then I switched over to eXp Realty, and I'm on the Property Geeks team, and we are in Lakeville. Not sure if you've heard of the Property Geeks before. You might have heard of Hannah Smith. She's the infamous Property Geek. Really great on social media. So that's how I got started in being an agent. So I've been licensed 18 months, almost a year and a half. How I got started in short-term rentals, I actually got started by accident. I was not trying to do a short-term rental when I got started. So in 2018, I purchased a real estate investing course or courses. I purchased a huge package of on-demand classes, and those classes talk about fix and flips, wholesaling, buy and hold, short-term rentals. So there's different learning paths for those packages. So I started by investing in those classes and getting educated. That group that I bought the education from, they do weekly meetups too. So it was nice to learn and then apply what I was learning by meeting up with those people every Tuesday. And my sister's actually a real estate agent as well and investor. So she kind of inspired me to do real estate as well. And then so I purchased that in 2018 to learn more about investing. And then in 2020, I purchased a side-by-side duplex property in South Minneapolis in the Armitage neighborhood with my business partners. So my husband, my sister, and brother-in-law were my partners on that. We found that property off market by doing ringless voicemails. So we did a ringless voicemail campaign and sent it to that zip code. And we ended up getting someone that responded and said, "Hey, I'm actually not selling my property, but I know a neighbor who is." So that was super cool. We met up with the neighbor, and then my sister was the one that facilitated the transaction because I was not licensed at the time. This was in 2020. The property had long-term tenants, so they were already there for 6 years at that point. Their lease was ending 6 months later, so we inherited the property with long-term tenants, which was nice. Um, all four of us lived in one of the units, and we finished the basement. So we added a bedroom, a bathroom, and living space to increase the equity in the property. It was a little cramped at first. It was a 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and then we converted it into a 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom, which helped a lot. This increased the equity in the home significantly, and then we were able to pull out a $70,000 home equity line of credit. And we lived in the property about a year and a half at this point when we pulled that out. And then my sister and brother-in-law decided to move out and get a triplex. So my husband and I were living in the property, and we're like, okay, we wanted to use this as a rental property. What's our next move? So we used the home equity line of credit to put a down payment on our personal residential property in Edina. And then we had tenants take the spot that we were in for that unit. During this time that we were closing on our property, our tenants said, hey, we put an offer in on a house. We're going to be moving out at the end of the month. And then we were like, oh crap, like what are we going to do now? Are we going to get long-term tenants again? Or maybe we should try this short-term rental idea. So my sister and I sat together, we analyzed numbers, we looked on Airbnb for different properties in the area, just to see what our competition was. We did some research on what they were offering. We thought maybe we could get traveling nurses because we were 2 miles from a hospital. We are also 15 minutes from the airport, so we felt it was a good spot for a short-term rental. We also plugged it into AirDNA. Not sure if anybody has heard of that before, but airdna.co, I believe, is the link. So you can add, or you can put a address in there, and then it will run numbers for you. You do have to pay for it, but there is a free short-term rental calculator on that too. So decided it would be a good short-term rental, and then we used the other part of the home equity line of credit to do some renovations. We needed to do some cosmetic updates, so we added paint, painted the cabinets, we did backsplash, we got some new appliances, and then we furnished the property by looking on Facebook Marketplace, which was great to do, but took a while to furnish because, as you know, similar to houses on the market, the pictures don't always look the same as when you see it in person. So it took quite a bit of time to find the right stuff, but we were able to furnish it. This process took 3 months. And then we launched it in October 2022 on Airbnb. And then we actually sold the property in August 2023 on a contract for deed. So I no longer have that property, but from October 2022 to August 2023, I ran it as a short-term rental. And I was grossing about $3,000 a month for that property. And then a question, why did you sell it if you're cash flowing? When we first bought the property, my business partners and I had a different idea than 3 years later. So things just changed, to be honest. We bought the property to have as a cash flowing asset for a long-term rental. And then things just changed 3 years later. They wanted to do different things than my husband and I. So we actually sold it on a contract for deed because we were able to pull out $220,000 of equity from the home. We bought the home in July 2020 for $390,000, and we were able to sell it for $580,000 from those updates. So for 3 years, part of it, you were O&O, and then you became a landlord, and then you did a contract for deed. Yes, to pull the money and move on. So my husband and I used the money that we got from the property to do a huge kitchen renovation. Our property's in Edina, and we bought it. There was older people that lived here when we bought it, so it needs some cosmetic updates. We decided to do a huge kitchen renovation and put $100,000 in our property. And now I'm at the point where I want to do the same thing again. I want to pull a home equity line of credit on my house in Edina and then get another rental property and run it as a short-term rental. So
Can I ask you, Jenny, through your process with this, when you guys started looking for properties, obviously you were looking at them for being a rental property, not a short-term rental. But when
yeah.
you're looking for a short-term rental, if it's for you or if it's for a client, what are the factors that you're looking for in a property?
Yeah. So if I'm talking to someone about a short-term rental, I always ask them what their goals are for the short-term rental and what client they would like to attract. Because if you are going to be targeting families, it's going to look a lot different than business professionals. So determining who you want to serve is essential to be able to do the short-term rental the way that you want, if that makes sense. I'm always talking to clients about looking at location, running numbers, and analyzing the deal is essential too, because the numbers have to work. If they don't work, then you're going to get into a bad investment. Numbers have to work too, because short-term rentals are more expensive to run. You have more expenses going into the property, like cleaning, if you want to hire a property manager, all that stuff. So you need to really make sure that it's a good deal and do your due diligence in running numbers.
So would you say that you were looking, because a lot of people that I know that I work with, they're looking for short-term rentals, but they're looking at like lakes or different areas that
Mhm.
are going to draw people in. It sounds like you guys were more focused on the professional side to it of like nurses, which I've seen and there is a huge demand for that as well. Um,
Mhm.
and just the business professionals, coming in and out. I guess I kind of look at this from the aspect of I don't, whenever I go somewhere out of town, I do Airbnbs. I don't usually do hotels. I like to be comfy in a spot, kind of like what you had said. Funny about the staging process to it, because now I'm a little bit more critical of like you look at the pictures and you get there and you're like, hmm.
Yes.
What are some of those things that I guess obviously renovation budget would be something that's huge because when you're buying a property, you've got to put money into it that way. Um, Staging, I mean, what would you say like percentage wise is the amount of money that you should be if you're just starting to get into this? What would you look at doing in that end?
Percentage wise to furnish
Like,
and renovate.
yeah, yep.
So I think we spent $15,000 to renovate and furnish. So I mean, I would plan to have more money than less, I would say. Always budget more because it depends on the client that you're serving. I also talk to clients about who do you want to serve? Do you want to serve a Walmart audience? Do you want to serve a Target audience or a Nordstrom audience? Depending where the property is, if you have a property in a nicer area, you might want to invest in more quality furnishings. So I would say probably 15,000 would be a good budget to have. Um, I would look for properties that, you could do cosmetic updates to and then have a good layout as well for the type of client that you're serving. But it really depends on the property. It's situational.
Yeah, I really like that analogy that you used of the target audience, like the Walmart, the Target, and the Nordstroms. Like that is a really good way to think
Mhm.
about your target audience and just the type. And there's nothing wrong, and there's a time and a place for each one of those. But it is almost then also what you can charge. I'm assuming.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
and there's things you can do, like there's a software called Price Labs, so that can help you with pricing properties too. You obviously have to pay for it, but it's nice because then it can sync with your property and analyze what other properties are charging for. I'm looking at the chat. I'll just answer some questions real quick. Where were you getting your short-term rental clients? Airbnb, VRBO, traveling nurses? I was getting them mostly from Airbnb. I did at the time want to put our property on VRBO, but for some reason I had to call them in order to set it up, and I just didn't make the time to do it. And Airbnb was working, so I was like, well, I'll get to it when I can. I didn't actually get to it. I found a lot of traveling nurses from Furnished Finder, if you've heard of that before. Furnishedfinder.com is where traveling nurses come from a lot. And then if you're looking to serve Nordstrom, how do you deter the Walmart prospects? I think pricing, definitely. I would say stay away from allowing people to stay for one night, do a 2-night minimum. And then there's different things you can do in your listing to like make sure that you're getting good guests. Like one thing you can set in Airbnb is make sure people have a government issued ID, make sure people have a profile picture. This is if you're doing instant booking. And then you can also ask people to send you a message of why they're staying in your property. Just to get an idea.
Jenny, can you talk through just city ordinances and zoning and rules and regs? So I think that's my hesitation with it is every city's different, and you go down the short-term rental piece and then all of a sudden the city says no more short-term rentals.
Yeah, so when you're looking for a short-term rental, I would always say have an exit strategy for sure. Run numbers to see if it would work for a long-term rental in case you need to pivot to that. Another way around that is converting your short-term rental into a midterm rental. So that's a 30-day stay or more, but not quite as long as a year. It's usually like 2 to 4 months. That's more so falling into the traveling nurses that are coming because they're coming and staying on contracts a certain amount of time. And I would say Google the city short-term rental ordinances, look for the .gov website and find the ordinance and read it. Then if you have questions, call the city and ask them about it. But that's what I would say. Also network with people in the area too. Find people to network with that have short-term rentals in that area and ask questions about how they're running their short-term rental in the city and stuff like that. But do your research.
Makes sense. And then you had mentioned, so your duplex, I think like South Minneapolis area.
Yeah, Southwest Minneapolis.
How easy was it to rent it out? So when you had it on, I think you said Airbnb, was it just constant people coming and going, or was it like, what was your vacancy?
So my vacancy I think on average was 70%. It's a little hard to talk about my occupancy because I had a mix of short-term guests and midterm guests. So the first month that we launched in October 2022, I had a mix of short-term guests, so a week or less. I guess it was from October until December. And then in December, I got a request from this guy that was from Detroit Lakes. He was coming down to look for a spot in the cities, and he needed to be close to the airport because his daughter was doing a volleyball tournament for a couple months. So he needed the property from December until end of March. So it was really nice because that was the first winter. And I was like, wow, this is great. I don't have to worry about, because it's seasonal, obviously. So we had him and then a few short-term guests. And then we had another couple. They travel or they live in South America. I think they lived in Brazil, but they have a house in Lakeville that they rent. And they have family in Eden Prairie, so they wanted to stay for the summer.
Got it. And then you had mentioned property management. Do you have somebody cleaning and doing the laundry, bed sheets, or were you doing that off the start?
I tried to do it, and then I decided, nope. I'm already doing that at my house, and it was just a lot. So I did find a cleaner through Turno.com. And when you go on Turno, you list your property on there, and then cleaners can submit bids for your property. And then you can review the cleaners and then reach out to them. So I did find a cleaner through that. And then he did do laundry on site too.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep. Good questions.
What was that website again that you said? It was Turno?
Yeah, I can send it in the chat.
That would be great. Because I do know that that's a really interesting one that I haven't heard of before. And it's nice to be able to like vet them beforehand because I know that that's the biggest issue that comes across. You got to get somebody who's reliable.
Yeah, and then it's also good to network too with other investors, because then if they have a really good cleaner, assuming they want to share their cleaner, you know, some people might get a little protective of, because then if their cleaner's busy, then they don't have time to clean theirs. But it's good to network with people and see who they're using, especially if they're good people.
Absolutely. I did see in the chat there was a question about animals, and I do know there was I read about this the other day. That was like one of the number one requests on Airbnb.
Yes.
Was if you can bring your animal.
Yeah. So in my property, we didn't allow animals. I mostly just didn't want to have to deal with the extra cleaning. I think when I get another one, I will allow pets, but I'm going to make sure that the cleaner that I have walks me through all of the fees, because cleaners, you want to make sure when you're talking to your cleaner, they're giving you all of the information of what they charge, because you don't want any surprises, right? So pets, they can be allowed. It's just going to be a little bit more expensive for cleaning. But there is a way where you can price your property on Airbnb where your guests are paying for cleaning too. You can kind of hide it in the nightly fee and then say cleaning is $0. Or you can just charge a number too.
Hey, it's Martha. I'm on a couple, I have a bad cold. I'm on a couple sites because I have this hotel, Jill, you know, so I'm on a lot of Airbnb sites, and there's a lot of discussion about the pets, about with, at least with Airbnb, that you can't deny service pets,
Mhm.
you know, so be very careful about that. I don't know how I'm gonna manage that, because it, you know, when it comes up, because I decided I do want to be pet, you know, pet free, but there's also a pet place, a place for pets that's close by that's very inexpensive. But that, you know, the whole allowing, people would bring two service animals, and you know, nobody gets two service animals. That's just the fake ones. But how you manage that, if you've ever had to be up against that, or if you are familiar.
Mhm. I didn't have any requests for service animals. Obviously, if I did, I would allow them because it's against the ADA. If you don't, but I had cameras on the property too, so I would be able to see who's coming in and out of the property. So when guests were checking in, I would check my cameras to see, did they actually have two guests? Did they bring another person? And then I would set, a message would go out. I don't remember how long. I think it was the next morning. How are things going? You know, let me know if you need anything. And then they would respond. And then if I did notice something, then I would say, hey, I noticed you had an extra guest. As a reminder, in our house rules, this is, and I send the house rules to them ahead of time before they check in. I think I had it set 2 days prior to check in, but I try to reinforce, like, hey, this is our policy, and remind people like that of that stuff.
So with service pets, can you charge more or not?
I don't think so, but I'm not 100% sure.
I don't think so, but you just have to be careful whether they're actual real service pets versus the fake emotional support peacocks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a slippery slope, but I think you can't all, I don't know if you can ask people. I don't think you can ask people, you know, why do you have the service animal? I think you just have to take it with a grain of salt and be like, all right.
Nope, you can ask that. It's in these, it's in the different Airbnb groups I'm in. You ask what do they do for you? What does your service animal do for you? And then you can I mean, if you're talking Airbnb, because I got on here late, you can contact Airbnb that it's not a appropriate service animal. You can ask to have their paperwork sent to you.
Marge, do you feel though that that's a slipperier slope for a licensed realtor than for just an average homeowner? For me, I feel like that's a very slippery slope, right? Because as a licensed agent, we're held to a different level. Like when I just sold my investment property, right? I'm held to a different level of standard. So for me personally, I wouldn't risk that conversation. Like a regular, typical John Doe that owns a place, he's not a licensed realtor. So you can't risk for me. So I'm just saying for myself, as a licensed realtor, I wouldn't put myself at that risk for that conversation. And maybe like Jenny said, instead of having photographs to like back yourself up later, if it's a peacock, fine, have that conversation. If they end up with 2 dogs, do I really want to risk a conversation with a person that's going to then
Oh,
be
I
taken
totally
somewhere else?
would. I totally would, because somebody who really needs a service animal, that's exactly what the conversation is. That's bullshit. Who has 2 dogs is, that who knows about that? And so, yes, it's how you word it, but that it's perfectly within your right to ask that. And really with today, with the internet, you should be able to look up who your person is and be able to determine whether they have a real service animal or, whatever. That you can find stuff on people to know whether you have that conversation. But if it's a legit service animal, they should be able to send you the registration.
There was and I do agree with both sides of this. With Liz saying that, I always say it's a slippery slope when you are an agent. And I always say, even to my clients, like, I'm not going to risk my license to not, be ethical. So I see both sides to it. There was a couple questions in the chat. Jenny, if you want to answer those.
Yeah. Somebody said, can we please get all of this information via email? Yes, I can send you this. I can send stuff to Jill, and then for the links and stuff that we talked about, and then she can pass it on to everyone. Let me see. Abby said a doctor can provide a letter to verify the need for a service animal. So yes, there is that too. I've never had to ask anybody. So, I mean, I can't really speak to my experience with it. I don't know if anybody else has their own short-term rental and has run into that.
I guess
Someone's
my question goes, I'd go down the aspect of I wouldn't deny somebody either, but what repercussions do you have if somebody brought in, a dog or two and they went all over the place and just destroyed your rental? What do you have to, are you just out it?
I mean, you can file a claim with Airbnb. I've heard that Airbnb is they're not as protective of owners as they are for guests. So you can file a claim. I would say also getting really good insurance to protect for stuff like that, getting short-term rental insurance on top of the property. You have your umbrella, homeowners or renters insurance, and then also add short-term rental insurance for risks like that in case there are damage, and then you can just file a claim with your insurance.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I want to bring up too, Jenny, is because I don't know if everybody knows on this, the other side of when you go and you rent an Airbnb, you have a rating status as somebody who has stayed in those properties. So I pride myself, and I always tell like my parents, if they're with me, or my daughter, I'm like, we are getting a 5-star review. Do not do anything to this property. When I leave here, I want that 5-star review, because if I have a bad review, like let's say for instance, Jenny could get my request and she could look at my reviews and literally go, nope, I can decline it. You can decline it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I take pride in that. I know not everybody does, but that is something that I do. But would you maybe talk about that, like when you get a request, what
Yeah.
you're looking for?
Yeah, so when I do get a request, I see if they sent me a message, and then most of the time, in my experience, most of the time, if they're a good guest, they're going to send you a message, explain a little bit of who they are and why they're renting your property. So that is helpful. And then I do go to their profile. I make sure that they have a picture, so I know that they're a real person, not a robot trying to spam me. And then I also see if they do have positive reviews. There is a setting that I talked about called instant booking, where people can instantly book your Airbnb if they do have a government issued ID and then profile picture, or if they have if they don't have any negative reviews. However, I'd be careful with choosing that one for negative reviews, because sometimes somebody could have a bunch of positive reviews and then they just have one negative review because something happened with that particular host and them. But I do make sure to look through people's profiles and read their messages, make sure they're legit. If they're not, or if I feel like if I feel like they're a little sketchy, then I do ask them a little bit more questions and dig further into that.
My one question, Jenny, because I like to keep it real with everybody. What would you say is the hardest thing about starting in the short-term rental business, that you've had to navigate through?
I think the hardest thing was figuring out everything quickly. I did have classes that I took. My classes were like 8 hours long. There's 3 different classes that I watched, 8 to 10 hours long, that helped me set up everything. But I think the hard part is getting everything on there, making sure that everything on there is descriptive, thinking of what are people going to ask me? How much information can I put on here to get less questions, stuff like that. And then figuring out what to do if my occupancy rate is not where I want it to be, or if I have, spots that are open in between weeks. If I have one guest coming on this day or weekend, and then I have a block in between the weekends, and then what are different ways that I can think of to help book those in between? I think also another hard part is it's very saturated. I don't know if people have heard that, but a lot of people have said, well, why would you do an Airbnb? It's very, very saturated. Yes, short-term rentals are more popular now than they were 3 years ago or 5 years ago. But at the same time, you can offer things in your property that make yours more unique than than the competition that you have. So I think being creative and thinking about what you can offer, what makes your property more unique than your competitors, and then being creative in your marketing. Another thing I would say is the fees on Airbnb, they get expensive. At the time, I don't know if they've increased, but at the time they're about 3% for the fees. So that's taken out of those bookings that you get. I would say another hard thing is Airbnb does not let you collect information for your guests. Like, you can't ask them for their email. It won't let you in the chat and on the Airbnb platform. So figuring out a way to get their contact information so that you can do direct bookings and eventually market your property to get it off of Airbnb. And that can be kind of scary because you're going to have to market it a ton.
I'm doing this now, so I know I'll be on booking.com and which also doesn't have good coverage for how, if anything goes wrong. Because my experience, former super host with Airbnb, they do not go to bat for the owner at all whatsoever. They are terrible. You are on your own. If you have somebody that's selling drugs in your house, you got some little kid on the other end that's the Airbnb person that doesn't do anything. And then the police won't do anything because it's a relationship you set up. So that instant book is probably the worst thing. And so the company I'm working through now, it does recommend instant book. We have that on but it's a hotel, so that's a little different. And the area is not an area like I see so many bad interactions, but they're also on the beach in Florida where you're going to have people partying. That's way different group, right? But some of my most successful was like yours, the longer term with people that I had one woman whose kid had to be near the U of M for 100 days after his surgery. I had several people that had brought their dogs from out of state to the U of M veterinary. So it wasn't a fancy house and that worked out well. But I too have heard how saturated the market is. So you got to make sure you either have a, a better offer, like you said, or,
Yep.
or really target who are the people that you're going to be renting to, and is the price, is because I'm seeing big fancy homes that are sitting empty a lot. And the standard vacancy rate, what I've read for hotels is 43% vacancy rate. So, but that's across the state. That doesn't mean, but with our seasons, that's nice
Yeah.
that you got like a 3-month thing going. That was great because the winter's the worst, right?
Yeah.
I would think one thing that I thought, I don't know about any of the rules anymore, but years ago it was like, if you were anywhere in St. Paul, for people to have family come stay, there's so many places that in St. Paul did not have any direct hotels whatsoever. It's like, the one on Midway on 94. That was it. And then there was like all the way to Bloomington, Egan. There's just like nothing. So, because a lot of times, so I had already been contacted yesterday by somebody who's coming to visit family and going to stay for a few days, right? And that's like a good stay because, of course, those people are more responsible too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to have strict house rules and put, if this happens, then you will be charged this fee. I had extensive house rules, and I made sure that when people booked it, they saw it. I sent it 2 days prior to their stay. I sent it a day after. And, I did make sure to communicate to them throughout the process. These are the house rules. One thing was like, if you leave dirty dishes piled up, you will be charged a fee. And this is the fee. So I tried to think about things that certain people could do and what I would do. And, if they tried to be like, no, I didn't do that, I'd be like, yes, you did. This was part of my rules. I have the right to charge you for that. I want to go into the chat a little bit. Someone asked, did you ever have to enforce a violation of the house rules, and how did you go about that? Especially in a short-term rental. So the guy that I talked about that brought his daughter with him, nothing against teenagers, but she was 17. She was bringing some friends in and out of the property, and her dad would travel for work, so he'd be gone. So, she's like, I have the house to myself. I noticed that she was bringing in people in and out of, just friends. So I did send a message to her dad because he was the one that booked it. And I said, hey, I noticed, your daughter is bringing in guests that are not on the property. Just want to remind you, these are the house rules. Only guests that are allowed, the only people allowed in the property are on this stay. Just wanted to let you know that. So then I communicated that to him. And then he was able to tell his daughter, like, don't do that. Another thing that happened with that is he ended up getting his car stolen. And I think that was, I don't really know what happened, but I think it was because maybe she was letting certain people in and they grabbed the car key. I don't know. But that happened. And I was able to catch it on video from my security cameras. And then I was like, I can't control what happens outside. I'm really sorry. Here's video footage so you can file a police report and go from there. But yeah, that was.
Can I just ask a follow-up, because that was my question. And I'm kind of thinking like in a long weekend or a 5-day scenario where they show up with their dog and just try to get away with it. It sounds like your leverage is either A, to fine them, or B, give them a bad review, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because you're really not going to have time to enforce anything in 4 days. I mean, you're going to show up and tell them they're breaking the rules, but they're pretty much gone by the time anything's really going to happen, right?
Yeah, and that's why I had cameras. I have cameras at the doors, so each entrance, and then I had a camera facing the driveway, so I could see, that they were parked there, who's getting out of the car, who's going into the property, and then if I noticed you know, there's 4 guests and they didn't tell me about the other 2, then I would message them. And then that's another way to catch if they're bringing an animal. I'm like, hey, we didn't agree on that. I see you brought a dog. So, but yeah.
I think there is a question now too, Jenny, in there about cameras, or it states in Airbnb, like I have cameras on the outside of the property. Because I know that's something that a lot of people are kind of uncomfortable with in a way, but it is more of like a security for you as the owner of the
Yeah.
property. How did you decide to say, like, we're gonna put cameras on the entrance? How did you guys decide that? Because I know there's some that do and some that don't.
Yeah, and your listing on Airbnb, and I'm strictly speaking about Airbnb because that's the most experience that I've had, you know, with VRBO and stuff. I don't really know because I wasn't on there. But there in the listing description, you can put security cameras, so you can check that. You can also put in your communication to your guests, I do have security cameras on the doors. You obviously cannot have them inside. Do not do that. That is not legal. But I would make sure that my guests know that. And I also took pictures of the cameras and put them in the photos. So I said, you know, security camera above the door or facing the driveway, so people knew that too. And nobody had a problem with that. I think it makes people feel more safe. But again, nobody said anything about it.
Yeah, no, I would definitely feel yeah, safer about it. Can I ask what you did for your doors? Did you put a key code that you changed every time? What did you guys do with that?
Yeah, so the company that we used, they were great. I actually would not recommend them, but I will say what they are. It was called Vivint Smart Home Security. They installed equipment so that it would connect with their app and I could unlock remotely, and I could set a PIN for the guests that were coming. So for new guests, I would always set the PIN to be the last 4 of their phone number because that's easy for them to remember. And then I would tell them in my messages, instead of saying your code is specifically this, it was easier to communicate. Your access code will be the last 4 of your phone number. So whoever booked the property, I would set it to that. I had to remember to do that before they went, of course, but I set reminders in my calendar because I manage this all. I did self-management. I didn't have a property management company. But that worked fine. And then in case people forgot their code or if a cleaner needed to get in and I wasn't there, then I could remotely unlock it, which was nice. I don't recommend using Vivint because their customer service is terrible. So,
but what a good option, so you don't have to go to the house and you don't have to do those type of things. Like, it's again something that you can do remotely and it just makes it so much easier.
Yep.
Yeah, good to know. Is there any other questions for Jenny here? We've got about 15 minutes left here. If there's any questions on that end about short-term rentals.
I'm just looking at the chat again.
Yeah.
This thing I put in the chat, that was written by someone whose husband is a disabled vet. And that's what she had in one of the, there's a lot of different groups, you know, with lots of opinions, right? There's a lot of Facebook groups. But it's a good way to get some information from, and it's always differing points of view on, like, a lot of people would never, if you're charging a cleaning fee, you shouldn't have to strip the sheets and do the dishes or put them in the dishwasher or anything. And you have a different opinion of that on how, because you have a cleaning fee, right, Jenny?
Yep.
Yeah. So, and I guess because it's now what I'm doing now is a hotel versus your typical Airbnb, there wouldn't be cleaning requirements, but they also don't have a full, if they're going to use the kitchen, they have to absolutely clean up after themselves and fill the dishwasher and run it if it's full. You know,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a little different.
There was a question about the difference between a service animal and an emotional support animal. So the difference, to my knowledge, is a service animal is able to help someone with a disability and they have a written letter from a doctor and they're trained in order. So for example, like seizures, the animal can detect if their person is having a seizure and help them. So a service animal helps someone with a disability, like that could be life-threatening. An emotional support animal, I feel like there's gray area because emotional, excuse me, emotional support animal could be used for someone with anxiety, but they don't actually have it written down. You know, there's not training for that emotional support animal to help that person with anxiety. A little gray area there.
I had a question that was texted over to me, Jenny, that I'm gonna, how did you market your property not on Airbnb?
So I didn't get to that point because I only had it from October to August, but I was looking into a website called OwnerRez. I'll put it in the chat. I think it's ownerres.com. But there's it's like a website that has all inclusive, you know, they can help you with automating the property, with sending messages. You can have your own website for the property. I think what I would have done is I would have put it on OwnerRez and then I would have made an Instagram for my property and started marketing it that way. I also would have tried to get my past guests' contact information. You do have their phone number, so you could text them, but I was kind of wary of texting people because I wanted to keep all communication in the Airbnb app in case something did happen where I would have to put in a claim, because then Airbnb would say, well, you didn't message between the guest and you in the app. So that's what they use for making sure that you did communicate.
That's kind of, I guess, how just what you're saying is, it's Airbnb kind of holding you accountable to making sure you're using their app and using their platform.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, a lot of apps are getting to that point, I think, where, you know, because we see it with like Zillow. Zillow is like, no, we want you to communicate through everything in Zillow. And I'm like, no, I want to get them out of that. I want to get on my platform. Yeah.
That's what I don't like about our listings in the, you know, every listing, Randy, every listing that we have put in our Facebook group, you have to sign in to see. And it's like, it's an inside Facebook group. We shouldn't have to sign in to see the listings in there. It drives me crazy. Like I always have to go in, you know, on the internet and just put it in because it's just takes less time than doing that. And I feel like, I don't know if if you have any difference of opinion on whether these new updates with what we have for MLS, but to me, it's certainly not better. It hasn't, you know, I feel like it almost forces you to want to go to an Edina that has you know, that's their big pitch. They have a great website, right? But so many people look at Edina, but they use somebody else for their realtor. So the signing in thing is annoying.
Yeah, it's definitely their way of everybody getting your information. And the crazy part about that is that you get their information and, you know, these bigger companies, they're selling your information. So, but you opted into it, so they can go back and say, well, they opted in. But yeah, very, very different. I know there was a few more questions in the chat. We've had a ton of topics around the emotional support dog. What I would highly tell you guys is research that. That is such a gray area that you have to be so careful. So please make sure you're doing your due diligence on that end. And you know, pick and choose your battles of what you're looking at for that for sure. Let's see. Before we let you go, Jenny, tell us about your new venture of what you're doing and how people can find you, where they can find you, all of that good jazz.
Yeah, so I am working on a digital product, so an ebook for it's called 5-Star STR Kit. So it's helping people basically go from A to Z in launching a short-term rental or helping to improve their short-term rental. So I do have a wait list for it right now. I'm trying my hardest to get it done and launched in the next 2 weeks. It's just time. I have clients that are taking me away, which is great. I'm doing a bunch of showings and stuff. So it's just hard with time, but I can share my screen and show you the outline. Just need to pull it up. And then I also do coaching. I have a coaching package if people want to sign up for that too. I have the link that I can send to Jill. If people are interested, you can follow me on Instagram, add me on Facebook. But this is what my starter kit is so far. It helps you from feeling stuck to 5-star Airbnb superhost in 3 months. Table of contents, power of short-term rentals, talking about your first property, all things listing optimization to make sure that people are finding you, navigating challenges, automating the hosting process, ways to market your short-term rental, networking, and then additional resources. So this is what it is so far. It's currently 30 pages. It's probably going to be like 40 or 50 pages. I talk about legal stuff, safety, security, and insurance. I talk about some tax stuff. I'm not a licensed tax professional or attorney, so please check with your professionals on that, but currently working on this. So if people are interested, I would be happy to share the link to that as well.
And then talk to us about your new Facebook group that you've created.
Yeah, so I have a Facebook group for, sorry guys, women real estate investors for short-term rentals. I just started that 2 days ago. I do have another group for women STR investors, but I'm trying to limit realtors to be in there because, full transparency, it's a lead generation group for me. But I did have a lot of requests from realtors to join that group. So I just made another one, and I'm going to mirror that group. In the group that I have, I do biweekly calls to talk about different topics about short-term rentals. I'm going to be featuring people that have short-term rentals throughout the state. So, or who are doing managing for other people. So featuring different topics, and then try to do meetups in person once in a while. So if ladies are interested.
Again, another good, and you mentioned it several different times in here, really good networking. It's like,
yes,
just like in real estate, you need to network. And just like on our call today, it's coming together as a group of people and learning more and having a conversation around it. So I think that's very important to do and immerse yourself into it for sure. So
yeah.
Good. Any other questions for Jenny? As long as we have her on, we know time is valuable. Obviously she's, a real estate agent outside of doing all this other stuff. So we know we're all busy with the spring market that's happened really fast this year. So
Yep.
All right, if there isn't any other questions, I will put Jenny's contact information again in our Facebook Connect page, and we will send you on an email with her information if you're on the call today. If you're watching this as a playback, we can definitely get that information out to you too, but watch the Facebook NRG Connect page. Next week, we have a fellow NRG agent, Hui Lee, coming on. He's going to be talking about investing your money in 2024 and how to maximize that. Excited about that. The following week, we're actually going to be having an agent panel. So we're going to be doing some agents at NRG, and we're going to be opening it up and asking them questions. And so watch that Facebook Connect page, because you are going to see me put out questions that you guys want answered. Bob, I will send you some information on Lofty training the next time we do one. I will absolutely do that for you. But you guys, go out there, do something great. Thank you so much for your time today. Jenny, thank you so much for taking your time and speaking to us about short-term rentals. Reach out to her, like her on social media, Facebook, Instagram. She's got some amazing videos, you guys, that she does with her real estate stuff. So please go out, get some ideas from her. But otherwise, go out there, do some amazing things, and let us know if you need any help.
Thanks so much. Have a good day.
Bye,
Thanks for your
guys.
time, Jenny. Thanks for all the great info.
No problem.
Thank you so much. It was a great, great morning.
Good. I'm glad.
Thank you.